Welcome everyone to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is Dao De Jing, and we'll be covering verses 56 and 57. Line up by typing exclamation point in the chat to read your favorite verse. Anyone? There we go. Evanique, thank you for always being first. It's an act of courage.
Well, thank you. See, Brian was just going right after me. So you said 57, right? Or 56?
56.
56, that's what I thought. Okay. This is from God as Nature Sees God, a Christian reading, and it's by Roger Mabry. Chapter 56. Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. So shut your mouth, guard your senses, blunt your sharpness, untangle your affairs, soften your glare, be one with all dust. This is the mystery of union. You cannot approach it, yet you cannot escape it. You cannot benefit it, yet you cannot harm it. You cannot bestow any honor on it, yet you cannot rob it of its dignity. That is why the whole universe reveres it.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up, we have Brian.
This is the Stephen Mitchell.
Hi, Penny.
Those who know, hi. Those who know don't talk. Those who talk don't know. Close your mouth, block off your senses, blunt your sharpness, untie your knots, soften your glare, settle your dust. This is the primal identity. Be like the Tao. It can't be approached or withdrawn from, benefited or harmed, honored or brought into disgrace. It gives itself up continually. That is why it endures.
Thank you, Penny. So next up, we have David. I'll ask everyone to mute. That's not reading.
Ready? Okay. So I'm going to share this Herman Old version. He who knows the Tao does not talk about it. He who talks about the Tao does not know about it. He whose lips are closed, who has shut the doors of the senses, who tones down that which dazzles, and knows himself lowly as the dust, is it not he who has attained the perfect equanimity? Such a one cannot be encroached upon, nor can he be repelled, nor he cannot be benefited, nor can he be harmed. He cannot be exalted, nor can he be cast down. Is not this perfect equanimity the most valuable of all things under the sun?
Thank you, David. Folks, type exclamation point to read your favorite version of verse 56. I'll give everybody a couple minutes here. If not, we will. Madeline.
All right, this is my copy of the Cha Fu Feng in Jane English.
Okay.
Those who know do not talk. Those who talk do not know. Keep your mouth closed. Guard your senses. Temper your sharpness. Simplify your problems. Mask your brightness. Be at one with the dust of the earth. This is primal union. He who has achieved this state is unconcerned with friends and enemies, with good and harm, with honor and disgrace. This, therefore, is the highest state of man.
Thank you very much, Madeline. And I have Margarita followed by Brian.
Yes, I will read in Bahasa. Yang mengerti tak mau berbicara, yang bicara tak mau mengerti. membungkam mulutnya dan menutup pintunya, mengumpulkan segala ketajaman dan meredakan segala kekalutan. Sederhana, gejala kegemilangan, sama seperti debu saja. Inilah yang disebut persamaan yang samar. Maka orang bijak tidak terlalu dekat dengan satu, sebaliknya tidak terlalu jauh dengan yang lain. Tidak menguntungkan dan tidak mencelakai pihak lain, tidak menjunjung dan tidak memandang rendah pada yang lain, maka orang bijak akan dimuliakan dunia. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. That was beautiful. So I have Brian Allenby, followed by Shrikant.
Okay, this again from Yasuhito Genku Kimura.
Oh, good.
Those who know do not talk. Those who talk do not know. Close the openings of your senses. Blunt the sharpness of your intellect. Untie the tangles of your attachment. Soften the brightness of your knowledge. Be one with the dust of the world. This is to be one with the Tao. He who is one with the Tao cannot be courted, cannot be distanced, cannot be bought, cannot be harmed, cannot be honored, cannot be humiliated. For this reason, he becomes the true treasure of the world.
Thank you very much, Brian. Next up is Shrikant.
All right, folks, I want to introduce somebody. I want to introduce Dana White. He has done his own translation of Dao De Jing, and he has produced videos of reading of it. So Dana, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for inviting me today. I'm very honored. As a preface to this, I think what you're, and I'm sure Joseph, if I'm not stealing your words, that you see common tropes among all of the different interpretations.
Sure.
And I would caution against using the word translation, because there really are no translations. They're all interpretations. Even what we call interpretations or translations are interpretations themselves. If you'll allow me to screen share, there we go.
It's already been set up. You can go ahead and screen share.
All right. This is a page out of the book, The Nature and Wisdom of the Dao De Jing. Consider speech carefully. Words are never the essence they name. Befriend silence and emptiness, from which names, sounds, and the 10,000 things come forth. Those who know do not talk. Those who talk do not know. Transact your being through actions, not words. Shut your mouth. Observe your senses. Listen. Close the gates. Eliminate access. Blunt the sharp tongue until the edges no longer cut. Simplify. Assimilate. Untangle. Stop winding things into knots. Soften your gaze. Become one with the ground. Purge until the essential nature of your being is revealed. Between essence and chaos, order is waiting to be born. Think of this as the primacy of being.
Thank you.
It goes on. To achieve primacy, center in your own essence. Gravitate towards silence and solitude. Move beyond the sway of friends and enemies. The sage is not guided by praise or humiliation. He transcends opinion and judgment without any effort. He does not strive or push. He sees through the illusion of profit and loss into the purity of doing and being for their own sake. Whether loved or rejected, people take him for who he is, one good for his word and filled with the integrity to the core. nothing sticks. His compass is fixed to the heavens. Words never measure up. The Tao endures because it is the source of endless expression, manifesting without need for validation or reciprocation. Be like the Tao. The sage tends paths flowing from the center of his being, like waters from a bottomless aquifer. When there is no particular destination to direct the flow, any direction can bring forth the Tao.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate it. Next
you.
up, I'm going to read from Ursula Le Guin. She calls number 56, The Mysteries of Power. Who knows doesn't talk. Who talks doesn't know. Closing the openings, shutting doors, blunting edge, losing bond, dimming light. Be one with the dust of the way. So you come to the deep sameness. Then you can't be controlled by love or by rejection. You can't be controlled by profit or by loss. You can't be controlled by praise or by humiliation. Then you have honor under heaven.
Beautifully done. Thank you, Shrikant. Is there anyone else that would like to read their version that spoke most to them? If not, then we will go to Jason for his translation.
Yeah, yeah. I hope everybody hear me all right, because I have some cold. I just test. I'm negative on COVID, so I'm fine. So I'd like to thank you, Dana, make a called interpretation, and I agree with you. That's all of the translation are actually interpretation. But here I want to make myself exception, because I'm doing translation word by word. Even it probably have a little bit 2 inch off, okay? But I already did my best to be honored, be loyal to the original ancient text. So that's what I'm going to do. So if you compare my translation with Dana's interpretation, you will find out that probably 1 million miles away, because he did his best to interpret. I did my best to translate. So I think that's the difference. And I heard everybody's, most of the translation, and then I find out if we talk about the central topic of this chapter, I just have to say I only agree with Shrikant's translation, which call this one as a deep sameness. Okay, because I believe this chapter is talking about the same. Because if you ask why, okay, why they put all this together, talk, not talk, dust, light, and all these things together, I think the only subject is talking about the sameness, because there's no difference. So I'm going to make my translation now. So first sentence, most people are doing the same. The wise do not speak. Speakers are not wise. So the question I'd like to ask, why they put this one as a starting? Okay, my point is, Lao Tzu tried to tell us it's hard to tell who is wise, who is not wise, who is the person with Tao, who is the person without Tao. That's why he put this one. And then the next 6 stanza, if you remember, I think chapter 52 and chapter 4, this sentence appear, okay, in chapter 52 and chapter 4. So we just repeat. So I I just copy from the previous version. Close their apertures. Okay, so based on this, because I see a lot of translation put shut your mouth, because at the first two stanza talking about the wise do not speak and the speaker are not wise. So the next naturally will say shut your mouth, don't talk too much. But just based on the word, and I also try to be consistent with chapter 4 and the chapter 52, which means close their apertures. Okay, so whatever means aperture, could be mouth, could be eye, whatever, basics. Lao Tzu doesn't want you to look outside too much. They want you to introspect yourself. So they talk about, he talk about close their apertures, shut their gate. Okay, remember the gate. Okay, always look inside. Blunt their sharpness and undo their tangles. Harmonize their light. They are the same as dust. I like to ask the question, why he talk about this? He talk about close the door, close the aperture, shut the door, and if it's sharpness blunted, untie the tangle, and the harmonize the light. Basically, he doesn't want you to show off. So that will be consistent with when you know Tao, you don't talk. Okay, so you don't want to, so you look the same as others. So he called, this is the profound sameness. I see a lot of translation because these two words, 玄同, okay. So 玄 could be means mystical and also means profound. And here in this Dao De Jing, I prefer to translate as profound, even it carries some mystical meaning. I think that mystical sounds too religious. Okay, so I would like to call it profound. And I think the tone, these words, a lot of translation as identity, unity, but I think here means sameness, because they are, Lao Tzu talk about we should be, even you with the Tao, should be try to keep the same, don't show off. So therefore, you don't gain anything from those to whom you are intimate. You don't gain anything from those to whom you are distant. You don't gain anything from those to whom you are favorable. You don't gain anything from those to whom you are malevolent. You don't gain anything from those to whom you are superior. You don't gain anything from those to whom you are lowly. Thank you, Armand, help me to line up all this translation. If you look at the Chinese here, okay, if I read in Chinese basics, the first 5 words are the same, only the last words are different. 不可得而亲, 不可得而疏, 利害贵贱. So these 6 words, they are opposite. 亲 means close, or 疏 means distance. Okay, and 利 means beneficial, favorable. 害 means malevolent. Okay, and 贵贱, they are opposite to each other. So 亲疏利害贵贱. So basically talk about, doesn't matter you are close or distant, doesn't matter you are favorable or malevolent, or doesn't matter you are superior or lowly, they are the same. You don't gain anything from those who high, who low, who close to you, who is nice to you, who is bad to you. You don't get anything from them. So they are all the same. So for this reason, they are nobles of the world. So I think that's the essence or the subject for this chapter. Yeah, I will stop here. Thank you. And if you have any question, or I will be very happy to anybody challenge me in why you do this, or the logically is not right. And I will be very happy to hear this, because in this way, I can make my own improvement. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, Jason. This is a great opportunity. We have multiple translations here this evening, but I would like to go to Aman first to see what his take is on this particular verse.
I'm just pleased as punch to see Jason take the edits that I suggested to heart. It warms my heart when I see the final product and go, oh yeah, there's the suggestions. And Yeah, I think it absolutely was excellent translation of this chapter, which is somewhat hackneyed. I don't mean to say that, derisively, but people who think Dao De Jing, even if they just have kind of a fleeting knowledge of it, it's, oh, those who know don't speak, those who speak don't know. And then, how does Lao Tzu go on to write 81 poems if those who speak don't know? So it's often that 56 is brought up as sort of a pointer or a guidepost in the Dao De Jing. But the rest of it, this profound sameness or this dark obtruseness, this deeper idea, I think is what is at the very heart of this chapter, that this idea of distinctions are the affairs of humans and not the way of the Tao. It's not the way of the universe to make the distinctions that we impose upon it. And so distinctions are laid out in so many ways as to be to have somebody struggle with the idea of, oh, I desire that, I don't desire that, I'm repulsed by that, I want that, I don't want that. And it comes back again and again and again and saying, these are not, one is not superior to the other, one is not better than the other. You will not benefit from having one versus having the other. The benefit comes when you can recognize the lack of distinction that exists in the totality of the world, and that it is just a convention of human perception and language that imposes it into your life. So I thought this was a great translation, and I was very happy to be able to contribute to it because I think it turned out masterfully.
And I agree. I do have one question, Jason. Something with, if you could pull yours back up really quickly, about blunting the sharpness one, something along those lines. Just something that you had mentioned. You said that it was to not show off specifically. And the kind of the impression that I'm getting with that, when I read that particular verse in several different translations and in a conjunction with Aman's comments, I looked at it as more of not making value judgments, essentially, about others, essentially not assessing anybody, not assigning a value to someone. So when you're saying blunting your edge, it's actually kind of holding back your opinions and not assigning your own values to someone. That would be the only kind of small distinction that I would like to note when I was listening to you go through that particular verse. If you want to comment, but Shrikant is next, followed by Douglas.
Yeah, I think I just do the translation word by word. Okay, in the text means blunt, their sharpness. Okay, that's the word. Okay, just by the word.
Okay.
错其锐. Okay, 错 means blunt, their sharpness. Okay, just word by word. Okay, so you can interpret as don't show off. You can interpret as don't make judge, or you can even interpret as don't hurt other people. Okay, so that's really up to you. Yeah. I just want to make sure the whole thing you read, when we read it, is logically sound. Okay, that's the thing I want.
Very good. So I have Shrikant, followed by Douglas, then Madeline.
So I'm coming to Dao De Jing after a break, and I'm just taken by the poetry, sheer poetry here. It starts out with this bold theme: who knows doesn't talk, who talks doesn't know, pointing to this deep silence, the importance of center as opposed to the external. And then it makes the theme in two very different ways. One at the sensory level, and second at the level of people. So closing the openings, shutting doors, blunting edge, losing bond, dimming light. So, withdrawing from your fascination with the senses towards the center. So there is a sensory movement away from the external. Be one with the dust of the way. So you come to deep sameness. So this is just at the sensory level, he's making the point. And then he makes the same point regarding people.
Sorry
Then
about
you can't be controlled by love or by rejection. You can't be controlled by profit or by loss. You can't be controlled by praise or by humiliation. So all the effects that you have while dealing with people. And just like that, the first part ends with, so you come to deep sameness. This one ends up with, then you will have honor under heaven. So this is honor with respect to people, which is temporary, fleeting, versus honor under heaven. So the same theme, it's like three, it's like introducing the theme. Who knows doesn't talk, who talks doesn't know, and then making it at the sensory level and making it at the people level. It's just beautiful. Thank you.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Thank you, Shrikant. Next up, I have Douglas, followed by Madeline, followed by Katie.
All right, Group Joe. Okay. Mine was a little poetry of my own. I talk, but I don't hear. I hear, but I can't talk. I see, but I don't know. I have wisdom, but what is it? I cried because I found that if I didn't talk, or if I didn't say, everybody would speak. Then I know I could hear. Then I know maybe I could talk. But what it is, it's the Tao. The most important thing is the Tao. The Tao of reason, the Tao of sanity. The Tao is one, and we are the Tao.
Thank you for your comments, Douglas. Very nice. Next up, I have Madeline.
Yes, thanks, Douglas. My question is about this, not in the advice to princes realm, but more in the metaphysical or mystical realm of if sages are doing this, then how are we ordinary people to recognize them? If they're not glowing, if they're not levitating, if they're just going around like the rest of us, how are we to recognize them? And how do they recognize each other? Do they have some secret signal?
Aman.
I realize that's probably not very answerable, but if
Actually,
anyone can.
it's answerable in a single word, duh. This is the section of the Dao De Jing on duh, and that is what is recognizable. It's not the trappings, it's what shines through from underneath as a result of the pure actual virtue that the thing in question possesses. And that's me expanding much further than needs to be really said. This whole section of the book on duh is to try and make that argument that this is how you know the real value of something is through its duh and not through what may appear on the surface or be heralded by society.
Thank you for that, Aman. I have Katie, then Brian, but Jason, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'd like
Madeline's.
I'd like to comment what Madeline
Sure.
mentioned. I probably don't have an answer to Madeline, but thank you for mentioning about this subject about how political of this one. Does this one advice to the prince or just for the regular people? I think this one is very political. Lao Tzu is talking to the prince, and this one specifically, because he's telling the ruler, the prince, don't talk too much, okay? And then close your door, okay? Blunt your sharpness, okay? Harmonize your light, okay? So be the same as the regular people, okay? That's the way you show your nobility, okay, in the world. I think that's the way he's talking about. So I think just related to what Madeline talked about, it's very political, the teaching to the prince. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Jason. Next up, I have Katie, followed by Brian.
Yeah, I have two comments. My first would be the blunt your sharpness. I think that's like the second reference to a knife. So I would tie that into like that, like that is sharpness in the sense of like a weapon, like not harming or injuring others. And then my second point would be like in an ideal world, people would only talk if they know. And I really enjoyed in a different meetup with this group when someone was talking about like how we make decisions like in a world of uncertainty, like, and then I link it to everything that Madeline said, like how would you know that someone is wise?
We can come back to that question, but I do want to get to Brian first.
Okay, this comment is from Penny,
Okay.
but I've been reading the Gita too, and when I read this last section of this, it reminded me so much of the Gita when they're talking about somebody who has done yoga and is reaching very close to the state to be one with the Brahman, because they say, you know, they're unconcerned with friends, enemies, good and harm, honor and disgrace. It sounded like the state that they said that people reach when they realize that they look inward and they're Atman and at Brahman, and they realize that the whole world is basically an illusion. And so it doesn't really matter what's happening in the world, because that's not the essence. Anyway, that's what it reminded me of. And I'm not sure if I'm just taking that because I've been reading the Gita, or is that kind of what the Tao is?
I'm going to let Shrikant actually respond to that briefly.
Oh, Penny, that was an excellent observation. I think the way in which it works in the Indian philosophy is that it is saying Brahman, which is basically the universe, the nature, the Tao, and it holds that Atman is Brahman. So you are that. So you have that divine spark within you. And what this is talking about is exactly that the terminology is different, but I think that trying to get at the same thing of saying, don't be distracted by all these lights. Don't be distracted by liking, disliking people, the praise or criticism that people have. Instead, fall back upon your core, and then it is heaven, honor under heaven. So it's the connection between the core of you and the universe. That is what is valuable, and focus on that. And that is the root of the way. That is the way. So very good observation. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Penny, and thank you, Shrikant. So next up, I have James, followed by Margarita.
Yeah, my interpretation of this piece is that he's talking about a kind of an intuitive knowledge, almost like a like a meditative state that you could where you don't have to speak, and you just by blocking up all your senses. And that's that kind of intuitive knowledge of the wholeness of one's being. Yeah.
This might be a good place to ask Katie's question then, though. How do you know when someone is wise then? I mean, you're speaking about an internal equanimity that exists, right? So then how do we know the sage exists? Or
Yeah, you don't know. You just you sort of have to have faith in this kind of not knowing. Yeah, it's not the kind of knowledge like scientific knowledge or evidentiary knowledge, but it's the knowledge of your own experience, I think.
very good. So next up, I have Margarita, followed by Evanique.
Yes, hi. Reading this, I remember what Amon says about the unlearning. I think all across our years, we are conditioned to expect some kind of consequence after our behavior. For example, if you're working with this person, or this person is wise, so he will hurt me, or something like that. So, and working through that means you need to unlearn some of this preconditioned response or expectation, and you become the uncuffed wood to some extent. However, the second point that I want to talk about is actually, I think there's this relationship with the researcher scientific approach, especially phenomenology. So when we, the researcher, try to study a phenomenon, you need to make sure that there is a certain distance, not too far, but close enough, but not too close, because otherwise your presence will interfere. Your interaction will make the response will not be natural from the phenomenon itself. And you need to don't expect anything, otherwise it will be self-fulfilling prophecy. Many researchers fail because of that. So, and you need to be silent, to be still, to let this phenomenon and uncover itself, to show its component, the real phenomenon, not your perception, not your anticipation or your hopes or your expectation. So yeah, I think that's quite interesting. Thank you.
So to allow things to unfold so that they can become what you think that what they are as to what you think they are. It's very interesting. We had a meetup on design thinking last night that actually addressed this very point. And I won't go into it into great detail, but it talked about interpretation and when to allow things, certain scientists allow things to just be and how they interpret things, and how others have to use their intuition, and they incorporate their intuition when analyzing certain things. So that's a very interesting perspective. There's two different approaches to take when we're thinking about that. So next up, I have Evanique.
Yeah, everybody had such great comments. So I think one thing I wanted to answer Katie's question about how do you know if someone is wise? And I think it has to do with namaste. And it's acknowledging the God in the other person as well as the God in you. Many other, well, the other texts that we're studying talk about that too. I think Penny mentioned the Gita already. So I'm just going to talk about the Bible, where it talks about, and when we did the study of John as the whole, Jesus says in one of the verses that, in the Old Testament, it talks about human beings being God, that human and divine. And I think once you recognize that, you could see wisdom in anyone, even if someone is not acting wise. You can see the lack of it, and that will help you see the wisdom. I think in order to recognize the sage, you also have to let go of the expectations. I think Margarita talked about that. And I think of this in terms of Jesus, where people were expecting this extravagant king to come and save them. They were looking for like somebody that's royal, somebody that had the proper lineage, which they didn't recognize that Jesus had, but they were looking for someone like that. And they weren't looking for a carpenter. They weren't looking for someone from Nazareth. They couldn't accept that. And I think when Jason was doing the translation and he was talking about, like no one who's malevolent, no one can affect you, basically. It's because it's from the internal. So if you cut off your senses and you start looking from inside out, I think that's how you see who's wise and who's not. You let go of someone who can speak well, but really doesn't say anything. And when Aman was talking about this, I think it was either Aman or Jason talking about this is to the prince, like he was talking to the prince. I think when you're talking about that, I think that's what it means. It's like, don't be the person that speaks well and it talks really good, but doesn't say anything. Look to the person look at what they're saying in the content of what they're saying, not how it comes out. So I think that's how you recognize it. And I think just the last thing is just, not letting outside influences affect what's going on inside. Things can happen on the outside that that could shake you. But if you're closing off the senses and you're going for introspection, then you're following the way of the Tao. And that's when you'll recognize other people who are following the way of the Tao because you're doing it. And that's it. That's all I have.
I'm going to come back to Shrikant here because this kind of gets to what he was talking about with centering a little, a bit, and this idea of silence and being comfortable within oneself. I think this is a very important point. Shrikant.
Yeah, no, Evanik did a fantastic job. I think this is a core. I think Madeline's question was just brilliant because that really goes to the heart of the issue. That how do you recognize? How do you recognize when somebody is doing that?
Right.
And Dao De Jing, Gita, and Bible, all three of them are pretty much united on this point. What happens is that it's like you're aware of your center and you're aware of how the universe is operating. So you're aware of the Tao, the way of the Tao. You are acting from that center and you're acting in accordance. So what happens is that is actually physically visible in some way. It actually speaks to your emotions. Your words carry it. And it touches people at a very deep level. So it's the kind of reaction that people have towards Jesus, for example. They immediately see him, and immediately the person itself, it's there in the character, it's there in the carriage, it is there in the physical movement, it is there in the words. And especially people who are more attuned to that can recognize it. People whose mind is focused on other things will not see it, but people who are focused on their own center can see the other person operating from their center because there is a commonality. I mean, the way in which the Indian philosophy would put it is that there is that God within you and there is the God within other person, and you see the God operating instead of being focused on the distractions, and you respond to it at a emotional level. You can see it physically, you can see it in the words. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Shrikant, for that. Beautifully put. I want to come back to Kevin, actually, before Douglas. Kevin hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. For me, the first, second chapter, but second section is the virtue of virtue here is here the topic like deep similarity, same. In our modern days, we all talk about critical thinking and think outside of box. My question, what's the box? Here, if you let's put this chapter, I'm going to maybe quickly sentence by sentence about the words. If you talk about the use of words, you're already in the box. So that's why I don't talk. If you use a door or the hole, you need to close it. You think about yourself, then open the door. And also use the light compared to a dark dust. So that's the same thing. Let's see, I'm specialized this, I'm super. You keep seeing that, and one day you're gonna fall down. And how about the other people's feeling? Those dust feeling. And also another pair about relationship, close and far. Another one is value of benefit or harm, or value of high or low. It's comparable. If they could be, and the day you think deeper, no difference. So that's how can how I can get understand this. If I missed last session you guys on, back to chapter 52, 55. Again, if it's something too robust, you're going old quick. You have to put your own harmony and balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Great comments. Douglas.
Yeah, when my teacher, Alan Watts, okay, would used to talk to the audience, and he would say, how many people out there know? And everybody would say, we all know, and you do not know. All the, saying that we know something when we don't know it, okay, is the first thing to admit, I don't know, okay? Even Socrates said that the idea is I don't know. But the thing that I'm looking at, a question maybe you can answer or he can answer, is where does enlightenment fit into the Taoism?
Where does I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Enlightenment, becoming enlightened. The Buddhist thing is enlightenment, but see if it must be, Second probably can speak on that, about where enlightenment and Taoism come together. Even though they're both two different things, one's Buddhism, one's this one, they both have a way of putting it together. So enlightenment and Taoism would be what? That's my question.
The way I view it is it's following the way.
Mm.
That is the enlightenment. I mean, essentially that if you're following the way, that you're enlightened. So that would be my only distinction. I think it's just semantics to a certain degree, but Jason or Ahmad may have a different opinion on
That's
it.
what I want to hear, what they think about enlightenment and Taoism.
I probably don't have a satisfactory answer on that. I think in Dao De Jing talk about enlightenment many times, but probably not talking about specifically how to be enlightened. Okay, so that's why I probably don't have a specific answer on this. But Ahmad may have the answer. I don't know. So.
The short answer to Taoism and enlightenment coming together is Chan Buddhism. That's what you get when you get Taoism and Buddhism getting together and having a little baby. You get Chan Buddhism, which my teacher always said is really Taoism and Buddhist drag. But as far as a salvation goes, or something that is salvation-like, the equivalent of Buddhist nirvana or enlightenment, or there isn't necessarily within Orthodox Taoism a single metric to be hit to achieve some sort of escape of existence. The goal is to get better at it in the here and now so as to almost be unaware of the distinction that you've moved from life into an afterlife. That would be one way of seeing a goal, is the complete cessation of distinctions, of all distinctions, including myself versus anything else, which is where Buddhism and Taoism were able to have a very close enough ground to sort of build something together. But Taoism is much more somatic and much more grounded in the experience as it exists now than some goal set off in a distant future. It's trying to become the better plate spinner here and now. And you're doing it well if the plate's staying up and it's taking you less effort, and you're doing it real poorly if you keep crashing your plates, both metaphorically and physically.
Very well said. Thank you, Aman. So are there any other comments on verse 56?
Can I ask Aman a question?
Please do. Yes.
Yeah, Aman, you talk about eat hastily and broke your dishes.
Oh, if you've ever seen like the
No, I just want to, did you say that? And where
Yeah,
did you get that?
if you've ever gone to the Beijing Opera or seen the acrobats perform, one of the very common acts are the plate spinners, the people who spin plates on long thin poles, and they make it look easy, and it's exceedingly difficult and very, very challenging. When you're really good at it, it looks so effortless, and all you do is walk by and tap a pole to keep the thing going virtually without any seeming effort. But if you're doing it poorly, your plates keep falling and they keep breaking. So there's a lot of broken plates and learning how to get there. Taoism is sort of like this, where you're finding a dynamic balance. It's not like balance, I achieve a point, I'm done. It's a dynamic balance that's forever in flux. And you get better at reading it and harmonizing with it and maintaining that balance than forcing it or, losing out on cookware. That's where the metaphor comes from.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Because I was shocked by your metaphor. It's a very common saying in my local dialect. Okay.
Oh, really?
Well, I think it's a coincidence happened. I thought that you know that, but actually you didn't know. Basically, my mom or my grandma usually will tell you, if you usually teach the kids in the manner of the dining table, if you eat too fast, you will break the dishes. Okay, so as you have your manner, so it's a very common saying, say, don't eat too fast, otherwise you will break the bowl. So we use this one as a metaphor. So do it slowly, otherwise you will break the bowl or dishes. So you will see the kids.
Grandmother said it better than me. And true is true is true.
Thank you. Joe, for some reason, dropped off. So I'm the host now automatically. So it's going to be Dana, Brian, and James. Dana.
Well, thank you again. I'm thinking of it in terms of silence and the still point, and that as we develop perceptions, sense, and words, they extend us away from who it is that we ultimately are, that when we separate and we connect, we use language as a tool to do that. And ultimately, the Dao De Jing is telling us, drop all that, get rid of the senses, get rid of language, stop this relentless pursuit, and instead of extending ourselves, do the opposite. Be the still point, find the thing that is the unmoved mover within us that divine, if you will. And it is the one common essence that all reality shares, which is the oneness. And enter that place of oneness, and don't try to look to another to be the sage. Be the sage yourself. Find that part of yourself that connects to everything, and you'll be the sage.
Thank you. Thank you, Dana. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by James. Brian.
So I chimed in because Joe asked if anybody else had more comment, and I'll just share that number one, I had no idea what this, I read it, but really was puzzled by this verse until we discussed it. So I thank everyone for their comments. What I've heard reminded me of something that I've done with my children when they started college, and with the college students I had when I was teaching. And it ties in with this the interpersonal part, and also this idea of core centering, be the sage yourself. I told them that, and I told my children and students as appropriate, that if someone else makes a comment about you, or if a fellow student makes a comment or suggestion to you about yourself, in the first instance, think of it as them telling you something about themselves, not about you. And so you don't learn, if someone makes a comment about you or a suggestion to you, in the first instance, you don't learn from them, you learn about them through that comment or suggestion. And then only after reflecting on it, but you might decide that, yes, well, I'm going to learn something from this person. I'm going, it's part of my center. I'm going to incorporate it, maybe incorporate it into my being, but not willy-nilly, all of this trying to please everyone all the time. That just does not work.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Next up is James.
Yeah, we're talking about this kind of, inner experience, or the real experience in our lives, right? And so I wonder if I could read a few haiku that might express some of that kind of experience.
Go ahead.
That experience of the inner life, but not just kind of like where you are separate from your natural reality. So the first one is mind runs. It's in the chat. Mind runs ahead of logic. Wild ginger. So the image of a wild ginger is like it's just the opposite of kind of this linear logical thinking, right? Because the wild ginger has all these different, grows in all these different shapes. And the next one is she hums her way to her inner world. And then the last one, you might get a little giggle out of this one. That's Zoom funeral, each of us in our own box.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, James.
You're welcome.
Yes. Next up is Katie. And then we will go to number 57. Katie.
Yeah, I liked how James had said that before. I think that really crystallized in my mind that we're not learning about the Tao like we're learning about science. Like when it was doing that naming and trying to like divide it down into little parts. I think that's really that's the science. It's more of a acceptance of the whole, which is kind of more like, I wouldn't call it I'm not sure what the word would be that I would apply to it. Not like a faith, but more like something like acceptance or something. I'm not sure what the vocabulary would be, but I like the use of the word scientific.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. All right, let's go to number 57. Joe's internet is down, so he's trying to reboot his router and trying to come in, but we'll continue. Please go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to read your favorite translation of number 57. We'll start with Evanik.
So chapter 57, this is the Roger Mabry, God as Nature Sees God translation. As a leader, lead properly. Don't resort to force in the usual ways. Win the world by not doing. How do I know to do this? Listen, the more laws and prohibitions there are, the poorer the people become. The more dreadful weapons you have, the more chaotic the state of the nation. The more clever and advanced your knowledge, the stranger things become. The more commandments and regulations you have, the more thieves there are. Therefore, the sage who leads says, I practice not doing, and the people transform themselves. I enjoy peace, and the people correct themselves. I stay out of their business affairs, and the people prosper. I have no desires, and the people, all by themselves, become simple and honest.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is going to be Margarita, Brian, Brian Nelson, Brian Allenby, and Katie. Margarita.
Yes. Yeah, mirip bahasa Indonesia. I think this is relate with a question previously from Madeline, how to understand. So, dengan kejujuran dapat memerintah di suatu negeri. Dengan kepandaian ilmu perang, orang dapat memegang komando atas pasukan. Dengan menggunakan kebajikan tanpa berbuat, orang dapat menguasai pemerintahan di dunia. Bagaimana aku dapat mengetahui? Inilah semua dari hukum Dao. Apabila dunia dijalankan banyak undang-undang yang membatasi, maka semakin lama rakyat semakin miskin. Bila rakyat dibiasakan memegang senjata, maka negeri semakin rusuh. Bila orang pintar dan licik, maka timbullah keganjilan. Apabila undang-undang dijalankan semakin ketat, penjahat semakin banyak. Maka seorang bijak mengatakan, aku menjalankan kebajikan tanpa berbuat, dengan sendirinya rakyat sejahtera. Aku menjalankan kebajikan tanpa berbuat, maka rakyat akan sejahtera. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Margarita. Always nice to hear the sounds. Next up is Brian Nelson.
Okay, this is the J.H. MacDonald. Govern your country with integrity. Weapons of war can be used with great cunning, but loyalty is only won by not doing. How do I know the way things are? By these. The more prohibitions you make, the poorer people will be. The more weapons you possess, the greater the chaos in your country. The more knowledge that is acquired, the stranger the world will become. The more laws that you make, the greater the number of criminals. Therefore, the master says, I do nothing, and people become good by themselves. I seek peace, and people take care of their own problems. I do not meddle in their personal lives, and the people become prosperous. I let go of my desires, and the people return to the uncarved block.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Penny. Next up is going to be Brian Allenby.
Okay, staying with Kimura for this one. Govern a nation with enduring justice. Command troops with unpredictable moves. Lead the world with empowering non-interference. How do I know this to be so? From witnessing the following. The more restrictions there are in the world, the poorer people become. The more weapons people possess, the darker nations become. The more cunning and cleverness there is, the more there are anomalous things. The more rules and regulations there are, the more there are thieves and robbers. Therefore, the sage says, I take no action, and people are naturally transformed. I delight in stillness, and people naturally do what is right. I do not interfere, and people on their own prosper. I have no greed, and people on their own return to simplicity. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Katie.
Rule a nation with justice. Wage war with surprise moves. Become master of the universe without striving. How do I know that this is so? Because of this. The more laws and restrictions there are, the poorer people become. The sharper men's weapons, the more trouble in the land. The more ingenious and clever men are, the more strange things happen. The more rules and regulations, the more thieves and robbers. Therefore, the sage says, I take no action and people are reformed. I enjoy peace and people become honest. I do nothing and people become rich. I have no desires and people return to the good and simple life.
Thank you, Katie. Next up is David Adelson. David.
Yes, I'm going to read the DC Lau version. Govern the state by being straightforward. Wage war by being crafty, but win the empire by not being meddlesome. How do I know that it is like this? By means of this. The more taboos there are in the empire, the poorer the people. The more sharpened tools the people have, the more benighted the state. The more skills the people have, the further novelties multiply. The better known the laws and edicts, the more thieves and robbers there are. Hence the sage says, I take no action and the people are transformed of themselves. I prefer stillness and the people are rectified of themselves. I am not meddlesome and the people prosper of themselves. I am free from desire and the people of themselves become simple like the uncarved block.
Thank you, David. Next up is Kavita.
Hi, everyone. My translation of Dao De Jing, chapter 57, is translated by David Taffley. Lead the organization with correctness. Direct the military with surprise tactics. Take hold of the world with effortlessness. How is it so? Through this. Too many prohibitions in the world and people become insufficient. Too many sharp weapons among people and the nation grows confused. Too much cunning strategy among people and strange things start to happen. Too many laws and regulations and too many criminals emerge. Thus, enlightened people say, look to inaction and people will be naturally influenced. Look to refined tranquility and people will be naturally correct. Look to effortlessness and people will be naturally affluent. Look to non-desire and people will be naturally simple.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kavita. Welcome back, Joe. I'm going to read my translation. This is going to be from Ursula Le Guin, and there is a short note after that that she has. She titles this Being Simple. Being simple. Run the country by doing what's expected. Win the war by doing the unexpected. Control the world by doing nothing. How do I know that? By this. The more restrictions and prohibitions in the world, the poorer people get. The more experts the country has, the more of a mess it's in. the more ingenious the skillful are, the more monstrous their inventions. The louder the call for law and order, the more the thieves and con men multiply. So a wise leader might say, I practice inaction, and the people look after themselves. I love to be quiet, and the people themselves find justice. I don't do business, and people prosper on their own. I don't have wants, and people themselves are uncut wood. The following is her note. A strong political statement of the central idea of Wu Wei, not doing, inaction. My monstrous is literally new. New is strange, and strange is uncanny. New is bad. Lao Tzu is deeply and firmly against changing things, particularly in the name of progress. He would make an Iowa farmer look flighty. I don't think he's exactly anti-intellectual, for he considers most uses of the intellect to be pernicious. But he considers most uses of the intellect to be pernicious, and all plans for improving things to be disastrous. Yet, he's not a pessimist. No pessimist would say that people are able to look after themselves, be just, and prosper on their own. No anarchist can be a pessimist. Uncut wood, here likened to the human soul, the uncut, unearned, unshaped, unpolished, native, natural stuff is better than anything that can be made out of it. Anything done to it deforms and lessens it. Its potentiality is infinite. Its uses trivial. Next.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do my best to try and run this from my phone. So this is a little bit more challenging. But I believe Katie's
If you have any trouble, you can hand it back to me. But
yes,
please try to.
Let's do that. Let's do that. We'll see how this goes. So Katie, you're next.
Should I go, or was Jason gonna give? I didn't want to cut into Jason, but I did have commentary. I had a thought.
No, not commentary. We're just reading the.
Okay.
We're just reading it.
Sorry, then I could read another,
Sure.
but I've already read.
No, that's fine. Let's go to Jason, and then we will come to you for commentary. Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, 57. Okay, I think this time I'm going to directly read my translation first. Okay. Governing a state by rectification, conducting warfare by surprise stratagems, gaining the world by non-interfering. How do I know? See this. The more prohibition the world has, the more impoverished people become. The more fancy tools the people have, the more disordered the state becomes. The more cunning the people becomes, the more strange things are produced. The more law and the decrees are issued, the more bandits and the thieves you get. Hence, the sage said, I practice Wu Wei, and the people are civilized all by themselves. I love tranquility, and the people are rectified all by themselves. I don't interfere, and the people become rich all by themselves. I have no desires, and the people are like uncuffed blocks all by themselves. So I think the last time we talked about what's the common theme in the entire Dao De Jing. The number one choice is Wu Wei, and I propose another is Pu, and which is uncuffed block, I think that's very important. It show up here. And I think this chapter is kind of like summarize a lot of important subject in the entire Dao De Jing, okay, politically, okay. So first three stanza, okay, governing a state by rectification, and some translate call correctness and or what is expected, okay. So I think that's in the Sri Lankan read what is expected. I just have tried to, because you use the word called 正, that's one word, and I try not to use a sentence, but it means what is expected. And it's opposite, okay, to the other things, is conducting warfare is by surprise stratagem, which is what is unexpected, right? These two things are different. And that's one is expected, one is unexpected, but gaining the world by non-interfering, so-called 无视, no interference, no sin. So two sin are important. One is 无为, everybody know it. Another one is 无视. 无为 means no action or no motive. 无视 means no interfering. So you will see this thing keep coming. So these three stanza kind of tell you a key, like see, right? When we govern in the state, we do something people expected. When we conduct a warfare, we do something people are unexpected. When we gain in the world, okay, I'm going to explain gaining the world later. Gaining the world by non-interfering. So how do I know this? So here is the translation. The translation most are the same, but I kind of disagree on the second one, this one. Okay, to most of the translation. Okay, so the first one, the more prohibition the word has, the more impoverished people become. Okay, I put a parenthesis here is some version use the word pan, that means revoke. Okay, so but it doesn't matter. That means more prohibition, the people got poor. And the second one, I just most of translation translate as like when the people have a sharpened weapon, have a weapon, and the country will become disorder. But I disagree. I think here, 利器 doesn't mean the weapon. It means the advanced tool. Just like what Sri Lankan read. Lao Tzu is kind of against improvement, scientific progress. So when people have more advanced tool, okay, the country have more become disordered. Okay, so I think you can see, imagine in today's situation, you know, kind of anti-progress. So, and the last one we talk about, if you look at the Chinese, it's very interesting, right? All start with this word, okay, that means I, okay. So I just want to make sure, because right now the Lao Tzu is the speakers, I, okay. So I as everybody, or we shall say, we, okay, we shall, okay, we shall do this, okay. So he said, I practice. So four things, right? All start with wu. This word means no, and this one is not. So basically, they talk about four things, right? One is wu wei, no action. Second is I love tranquility. So that means quiet. Also means no action, not restless. Okay, no interfering. Again, no desire. So that's the four things. If you act on these four things, the people, okay, will be civilized, be rectified, be rich, become a poor, uncovered all by themselves. You don't have to use the outside world. I think that's the whole subject is talking about, how to govern a state. Okay. Yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'm going to be doing the moderating because Joe is having some technical difficulties. Thanks, Joe. I'll take care. All right. So folks, it's time for your comments. We'll start with Aman. Aman.
Again, I wanted to say thank you. I always get tickled to see the final product from Jason. And I think we agree, especially on that second line, cheat, where it's often translated as sharp weapons. I think part of the reason for that is the makeup of the word cheat is made up of a dog and 4 open mouths. So you can almost picture a pack of dogs with their mouths open. And it's easy to see how that could be expressed as weaponry. But as far as fancy tools go, if you think of like an Iditarod or dog sled, that would be a novelty for somebody in China to have seen at this time. And it would be considered very fancy and probably unnecessarily so, because why do you have dogs doing what a horse can do? I do like that idea that fancy tools bring about the disorder of the state. And when we were talking about this, it occurred to me that, you know, telecommunication is great, but when a phone becomes so fancy that it delivers the entire world of the internet and social media, when sort of unrestrained or without constraints, how could something so simple and so fancy bring about the downfall of and disorder of society? But we've kind of been witnessing it in real time in the here and now. And I do think it's easy to read Lao Tzu as overly conservative, very much against any form of progress. And I see where many people have done that. I don't know that that is absolutely the case. I read this more as a cautionary tale. With this progress, expect these problems. They may, you know, smooth out in the end, but these things will bring about some rough hiccups within your society. And so you, if you're to be in charge of it, need to be above the delights and wonders and thrills of what this latest gimmick may bring you. You have to have a clear, grounded vision of what your people actually need, and then step back and let it develop with the barest and subtlest of touch in order to have people see it as something they've done all by themselves.
Thank you. Aman, I have a question for you and then for Jason. The same question. I mean, this concept of uncarved wood seems like a core concept here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Do you want to go first, Jason?
Yeah, I can go first. Okay, so you can comment on what I'm talking about. So I think it's a two important theme in whole Dao De Jing. One is Wu Wei, everybody knows. Okay, that what I read as political. Okay, so basics, you govern the world. Okay, gain the world. Okay, by Wu Wei, try to achieve something by Wu Wei. But what kind of person you need to become? Okay, this is so-called Pu. Okay, that will be self cultivation yourself should be Pu. Okay, Pu is a word very difficult to translate, and then you can imagine, right? So you can cut the wood, you can polish, make a table, make some beautiful sculpture. That's one way to do it. But another way is like if you see a 1,000 years old tree and you have the tree trunk with odd shape, you can see the beauty of this one. So this one so-called uncuffed wood, Pu. Okay, so I think this kind of you consider as a personality or personal virtue is being valued not only by Taoism, okay, also by Confucianism. Okay, so this kind of person is both Confucianism and the Taoism appreciate. Okay, don't talk too much. Okay, heavy and not polished. Okay, honest, solid. Okay, whatever you can think about. That's the personality you want. So reflect to Wu Wei. Wu Wei is the way you do something. And the uncuffed wood, Pu, is the person you need to become. And that's my explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely accurate. Pu is ironically one of the more complicated characters in Chinese writing. It's like 16 strokes to come up with this relatively simple looking concept that I just put in the chat. And it's made up of wood and business and weeds and fu, which is sometimes translated as husband. But there's a wonderful book that has made the circuit for years, the Tao of Pu, that Benjamin Hoff wrote, that I think a lot of people have picked up in the years and gotten their first impressions of Taoism. The character from the childhood literature, Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, is, to Huff's mind, the embodiment of Pooh, the concept of simplicity, of naturalness, of not taking on unnecessary affect and being allowed to be its own thing. So usually termed the uncarved block, sometimes also the undyed cloth is a way of expressing the idea of Pooh. And the idea is to have something that is of itself all it needs to be. That's probably the simplest way to impart that in less than a small pithy book about Winnie the Pooh.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Aman. Joe, are you back?
I'm back. So
wonderful. So I just want to give you the order. It's Katie followed by Madeline. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. This is rough. This chapter is roughly in line with some of beliefs that I had before reading this, that people have to often want to want it for themselves, kind of thinking. You don't need to, if someone doesn't want to throw a piece of trash in the trash can, you don't need to set a law to make someone want to do that. I think that's kind of in line with like governing, like that people have to kind of rule themselves and want things for themselves rather than everything coming down from a leader. And also because like the law doesn't touch everything and the enforcers aren't around all the time. So
thank you, Katie. Madeline.
Okay, well, there's so much in this that seems to apply to today's world, at least in the US, that it's difficult to get a handle on it. I liked what, when Shrikant was reading Ursula Le Guin's commentary, saying that he was, Lao Tzu in this was so conservative that he would make an Iowa farmer look flighty. And indeed it was, I think as Aman pointed out, it was or Jason, that there was a very sort of Confucian basis to an agrarian society. And the first part of Jason's translation, Jason, can you put the top part of your translation back up on the screen?
Thank you.
Okay, so there we are. So conducting warfare by surprise stratagems was the phrase that jumped out at me. And it looks as if the constant issuing of prohibitions and the constant generation of novelty technologies and extraneous goods are in fact things that are surprises to this Iowa farmer. And so that in effect, it's almost as if there's a constant state of war in that people are being taken by surprise when a ruler rules like this, which when things are done in the traditional way, which in the US would be a more public way rather than a secretive way, people aren't surprised. So I think in a way it seems as if this These constant surprises do sort of generate a warlike turmoil within the population.
Thank you, Madeline. Kevin.
Thank you, Joe. My interpretation is simple here. If it's sage, you can change it to a governor or ruler. That's really, you know, political. However, I think about this. I think about is I lost my words.
That's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We can come back. We can go to Jason
Okay,
and then come
yeah,
back. Sure. Okay. Jason.
Yeah, I like to use this chance to talk about let me show my screen. Okay, talk about the second thing we talk about, the sharp weapon. Okay, when we talk about
on 56.
Yeah, 57, right? With this one, when I talk about the more fancy tools that people have, the more disordered the state becomes. Unlike most translation, we talk about is when the people own the sharp weapons, the country become disturbed. Okay, so I put a note on 53. So I would suggest to take a quick look on the 53. The whole 53 is talk about this seed, right? He talk about the way is so easy. So, but the people are looking for shortcut. Okay. So if people looking for shortcut, blah, 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 they have all kinds of problems. This is not Dao. That's what 53 is talking about. So the reason I'm making this, I think this one is not talking about people owning the sharp weapon. It's talking about the people looking for shortcut. Okay, have advanced technology. So that's why I would like to refer to chapter 53 because it's related to this shit. That's the thing I like to mention. Yeah, thank you.
That's an interesting, interesting point. Aman, unless Kevin, do you have your words yet or no? We'll come back to you. Aman first.
I just wanted to say, to reinforce Jason's point and to sort of highlight it, the idea of how many of us are touched when we receive a text message these days on the phone versus how many of us would be touched to receive a handwritten letter in the mail. There is something, what was it, Thomas Paine, who said, what we gain too easily, we esteem too lightly. And I do think that that is part of the idea of fancy tools bringing about disorder in society. Those fancy tools may allow you to gain certain things, but do you still esteem them in the same way?
Yes, there's always something lost in the process. Like there's something that is, you know, even if it's just the effort itself, you may be gaining efficiency, but you may not be gaining the effectiveness of what you're actually doing. It's very interesting. Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Now come back, my idea come back. Before I forgot, maybe in a few years, everybody forgot. A little bit of culture aspect. The tradition, you know, not a few years ago, we still value virtue over law. Law is the minimum, basic we have to follow. Virtue is big. If you doing something is not common, make common sense, not follow the virtue, you see the village, some society still use this. It's not good. Yeah, it's that's here's answer, but what's the order? So we now let's see, we normally see, oh, here's bad thing, make one law. That's that's like the more law you're going to have, more, you know, bad thing, theft and going to happen. And the answer is a pool. That's the wisdom of a pool. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, ideally things would be better if we were all virtuous. One of the things that I think of when I hear about laws when they're being made sometimes is that hard cases make bad law. And things that sometimes when we hear a hard case that tugs at our heartstrings, so to speak, we come out with a law, but the law may not be rational. It may not be serving its actual function. So sometimes it's a knee-jerk reaction. And I think that leads to sometimes over criminalizing or over regulating something in particular.
Yeah, I would add 2 sentences more. Is like, for example, being a Western here, like relative, direct blood relative, like parents and children. It's by law. It's no responsibility after 18 years. It's so me for me it's weird. It's like everything by law. But that's like old days, traditional 4 generation, one family, try take care of each other. You feel like that warm thing we lost. Our neighbor, we don't need to talk each other. Especially leave apartment. That's weird. Phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I want to go with Aman, Evanique, then Douglas.
I actually don't want to jump the order. I
Okay.
do want to comment on Kevin's idea, but I want to allow Douglas and Evanique to go first.
Okay, all right. Evanique?
Yeah, so when you were talking about something being lost, like I think it started off with Aman was talking about the letter versus the text, like to get a heartfelt text, people get more excited than getting a heartfelt letter. And then, we were talking about using the tool of texting and something being lost in the design. And I was thinking of the Evil of Design chapter of Design Way. And I think one thing that I think this passage is warning us about is that the thing being lost, like is the thing that's going to be lost when you have a new tool or new something, is the thing that's going to be lost worth it? Is it going to take away from your humanity or take away from the eternal? So I just thought about that and thinking about all the technology and things we have, even like things like Zoom in the age of a pandemic. It's great, but what does it take away? And is it worth it? And how do you counter that? I think, I think one thing is you have to look internal to see if you're like why you're doing something or why you're using something. And is it affecting you internally? And I think it goes back to the last chapter where it talks about take away all the senses and find out what it's doing to you as a person. That's all.
Mute. Sorry about that. Thank you, Evanique. Douglas, followed by Aman.
Well, laws change all the time, but I remember going after the marijuana laws, to get them on the ballot and getting signatures and stuff. And the thing is, those laws changed, okay? So over time, things change. They have so I see what he's trying to, about changes, that we have to look at the seasons. So when it's 4 seasons, different times of change. And there have been a lot of laws that, just to answer his question, that have, changed over the years, and things have changed, and they will change. And that's like the seasons change, and so will life itself. There was a lot of changes and so on.
Thank you, Douglas. Aman.
So I wanted to, Kevin's comments got me thinking, because in that middle stanza where it says the more prohibitions, the more fancy tools, the more laws and decrees, only one of those are a concrete thing in the form of tools. And I loved that Jason said the more disordered the state becomes, because it doesn't say that these will be the downfall of society, just that your normal order of status quo will be disrupted by these fancy things. And you need to be aware of that and prepare accordingly. But before and after are ideas about decrees from above, laws or prohibitions, and how those impoverish people or cause people to become thieves and bandits, which are much more consequential and catastrophic in the idea of society falling apart. And when Kevin was talking about the the laws and how we have a statute, once you're 18, you're no longer your parents' responsibility. So in this country, so therefore we take no responsibility for our children after that age by fiat, not necessarily in reality for everyone, but it becomes more normative because that's how the prohibition or the law is put into place. What that got me thinking of was a recent conversation I heard a while back about quote unquote cancel culture and a generational divide of somebody arguing with a millennial about this cancel culture that their generation had started. And she looked at him and said, "You were the ones who taught us zero tolerance in school for drawing a gun or playing cops and robbers. There was zero tolerance because we were taught these were acts of violence. Now we extend that into your world with the power of adults. So you must hew to the same laws you subjected us to." This, to me, it really captures the idea of proclamation and law and its consequentiality, not that it simply robs you because, oh, hey, it's good to be naughty, there's a taboo, but because if you put something in place, the odds that it will come back to bite you in the form of unforeseen consequences in the future is probably about the most gold star guarantee you can get from the idea of ever transforming changes. Try and enforce it too hard and you can watch how it comes back to slap you in the face eventually. That's what I think is really significant in that part of this chapter. Is it's warning a person with power that, hey, you've got power, don't wield it the wrong way, it will come and bite you, I promise. If you try and, probably the worst thing a ruler could be in ancient times was capricious, and this is really an admonition against that, both for everyone's sake and also for the person in charge's sake, because it's going to harm everyone involved.
Wow, those are excellent comments. That's really important. It kind of reminds me of something that if you overname something too, that you kind of limit it to what it is possible, what it could possibly be. So that this is the idea of kind of naming something, but not naming it too, not too far, not going too far, and kind of thinking about the unintended consequences prior to making a law, because you're saying this law is like almost a principle. Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Armand. And one thing I would say, one word "zhen" is the correctness, and another qi, strange or yin. Nice word will achieve with the innovation. I'm sorry, not political. I'm gonna use one example. Let's see, 2 years ago during last presidential election, you see Facebook to the president. You see the tools, how powerful. You go into fantasy tools. It's never, I would say in my imagination, never happened to they can cut you off. No voice. You see, you can imagine our ordinary people. We could one day continue that 18 years rules. You think about if model children and parents relationship. Old days, we got dinner, sit together. Now, no. Now use a cell phone to try call kids up. They know. They don't want to go up. They live with device, with internet, with social media. Where's parenthood? My question would be asking myself and others, where are we going as human beings? Thank you.
Yeah, having direction is absolutely critical. Thank you, Margaretha, for putting number 32 in there as the to know when to stop naming things as a warning. So I have Jason next.
Yeah, just, after Kevin talk about the word "zheng," I like to show, because these words have been showing many times, and then that's one translation called correctness, or I call it rectification, or in another translation say what you expected. These words, that's these words, okay? These words, I pay special attention on that. So until I translate this chapter, I start to understand this word properly in Dao De Jing. So I have to probably have to go back to the previous 56 chapters. Any words with this word "zheng," I probably have to rethink about that, because I did some research. If you look at this one, the ancient words like this. So basically, talk about this one is a city, okay, a fortet, a walled city. Here is a foot. So basically, you put your foot into a city. So that means conquer, okay. But if you ask a question, why are you want to conquer another city? Because I want to correct them. They did something wrong. So these words become the rectification, correcting, what's the right thing, so become a very, very popular word. So that's the thing I like to mention is in this word. For the people not reading Chinese, probably not see that's important, but whenever I do the translation, this word causes me a lot of problem, because I need to figure out what's exactly the original text means when Lao Tzu use this word. So that's something I like to mention, because Kevin talked about this word. So it's give me a lot. I spend a lot of time thinking about this word and how to translate to English. So that's the first thing I like to talk about. Second thing I like to talk about the so-called 取天下, gaining the world. I translate as the gaining the world. And I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, Madeline asked the question, what the meaning of the governing the world, conquer the world, take the world. But basically the word means snap the world. And I find out that in Dao De Jing, it talk about this one 3 times. Whenever it's very subtle. Basically, the pre-assumption is the audience, the prince, has an idea to snap the world, to gain the world. That's their lifetime goal. Just like in the medieval or Europe, all the king is thinking about unite the Europe, this kind of thinking. So the reason I talk about this is this word, the gaining the world, happened in Dao De Jing 3 times, and it sounds like it's an important topic in the prince's mind. Okay, and compared to Confucianism, talking about how to deal the world, Confucianism will use pacify the world, so-called 平天下. Some translation call it bring peace to the world. I disagree on this translation, because I think Confucius is talking about pacify the world, but the pacify means, for example, if you have rebel, you have to pacify it. Okay, so these words probably a little bit more violence than Dao De Jing's gaining the world. So I know it's a little bit subtle, but I just like to point the difference when Taoism and the Confucius talking about how to deal with the international business or entire China. Taoism talking about gaining the world, snap the world quickly, do something. Talking about the goal and the end. And the Confucianism is talking about the means, which is pacify the world. So I think they have a subtle difference here. That's why I like to mention. Yeah, I hope it's not too far away than people's thinking. But yeah, thank you. Thank you
No,
for
thank
listening.
you. No, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Madeline.
Wow, thank you, Jason. I actually have a question about the etymology of rectification that you had shown, which was the foot entering the city. So I'm sure that in the original context, it's been interpreted as conquer because it probably was in a context that meant conquer. But I was thinking just from the image, it also implies a person entering a city on foot, which seems to be sort of entering a civilization from the outside and coming into something and learning what the mores and the ways are, as opposed to being in your familiar agrarian country setting of your feudal world that you're living in at this time. And so that rectification in that sense might also mean like an integration into a communication with strangers in such a way that people have to make things clear to each other.
Madeline, I just have to say, at least in my knowledge, I don't see your, at least I just have to say, I probably, I would look at it this way. This word, rectification, is a very important word in ancient Chinese philosophy, right? In Taoism, they talk about this word. Confucius is kind of the worship this word, okay? They talk about rectification of name. Okay, if you know, when his student asked Confucius, okay, how to govern the world, he talk about the king like a king, the minister like a minister, the father like father, the son like son. It probably sounds nonsense for most of the people. But for Confucius, rectification of the name is so important. That's in Confucian thinking. Legalism have their own way of thinking about rectification. They talk about correct. They put a name, but you correct your behavior. So this word is utterly important in the ancient Chinese philosophy. So that's the thing I like to mention based on what I read. Yeah, but so it's a single word worth to spend a lot of time to study. Yeah.
Aman.
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Jason was saying and address a little bit of what I think Madeline was getting at. It's in the notion that within the same single term, different connotation can be drawn out of it. Because as Jason was saying, Confucianism talks about the rectification of names, whereas Taoism is talking about the rectification of a city or a people or a governance, a state. Those are very different ideas. It's almost the idea of application of proper method to bring things into a harmonious, continuous existence. And that's clunky, but I think if you apply that notion to something like names, you see where Confucians were saying, start calling things the right thing. Stop letting the language drift. Stop letting people get away with referring to themselves as king when they're not. Whereas Taoists saying this about a city, they're talking about something as complex as an anthill. And they're saying, you can't get every person in their right spot, in their right way. So there's a different way of rectifying this cacophony of living activity. And that is through, way, non-action, non-interference, the method and means of Taoism to allow this to rectify in a way that looks almost spontaneous, like birds flocking together.
Right.
Nobody has to tell which bird where to get in order. They simply do, because that's what birds naturally do. You don't need to tell these people how to get in order. You have to guide them to do it of their own natural accord, which they will naturally do if they're not titillated and distracted by too many superfluous things. That's kind of what I think the Taoist argument is. And so I think both of these ideas as, conquering force, but also harmonizing force, aren't absolutely at odds with one another. I think they are just different connotations of the same idea.
Wonderful comments. And I mean, this is actually very interesting because I think it gets to the heart of the Tao itself. And then I'm reading actually number 32. There are multiple ones that I'm reading, but one phrase is, once the whole is divided, the parts need names. There are already enough names. One must know when to stop. Knowing when to stop averts trouble. Tao in the world is like a river flowing home to the sea. And I think that it's an interesting way of looking at it. It's just once you start dividing things up and start parsing things out, that you start to name things and you have to call something. And then at some point it becomes, something where it's almost impersonal. And it's lost its value to a certain degree in relation to the whole. And I think that's what the Tao is kind of warning against. That's just my personal 2 cents. Are there any other comments? Aman, have a great evening. Thank you. So if I would, Shrikant, would you like to make some announcements regarding some upcoming meetups?
Yes. So let me see here.
And thank you for stepping in when my internet went down. I apologize.
That's the purpose of having a co-host.
Thank you.
That's what you do for me when I'm running the meetup. So I'm just returning the favor.
Thank you.
So I'm doing a series of meetups on the weekend. Let me see if I can bring that up. This is not the screen. Let me see if I can bring that up. Give me a second here. So what I'm trying to do is that we are actually in the midst of this, going through the Gospel of John, Dao De Jing, and the Gita. And I started by trying to look at the patterns amongst these things. And I have a visual, I use diagrams. I'm a very visual person. I use diagrams to bring things together for myself. And this is the diagram that I'm using. I call it E quinque unum, which means from the 5, 1. This is, patterned over E pluribus, which is from the many, 1. So this recognizes that there are various parts of us and we need to bring them together. So that's the theme I'm working on. And so this weekend I'm doing a meetup this Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time on integrating these 5 aspects of us: the spiritual aspect, which is the yellow here, the intellectual aspect, the physical aspect, the emotional aspect, and the social aspect. So this is you and this is the community. So integrating all of that. I've done that. Like, for example, I did a short presentation during my presentation on virtues from the great books on the same topic on. So the virtues of justice, for example, is all about the social virtue of bringing these 2 things together. Virtue of temperance is about managing your emotions. Virtue of courage is courage to take physical action. Virtue of prudence is about using your reason for directing your life, emotions, and everything. And the theological virtues, which are the spiritual virtues, love, God, hope, faith, things like that. I also see the same pattern in all of these, in Gita, Dao De Jing, and the Bible. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to keep developing themes of how these are integrated. And I'll be building on this. So that's going to be on Sunday at 11 a.m. It's the most ambitious meetup that I've been trying to do. I'm integrating that with the great books. That's the Syntopicon, the 103 Great Ideas. So I'll be looking at different virtues. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do this Sunday, but I'm going to do the best I can. I'm trying to move things forward as much as possible. Tomorrow, Mike will be here, and he will be talking about the fear of success. It's a very interesting topic. There's a beautiful poem on the meetup page, which I highly recommend. And he's going to be talking about fear of success. On Thursday, we are going through Gospel of John. It has been most amazing. We have integrated commentary of Thomas Aquinas, and that is really showing me, and I think many others, how much you can extract from a text. So it is really, really deep. On Thursday, that's on Thursday. On Friday, we are doing Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita, what we are trying to do this time is to just focus on 9 verses, 33, chapter 4, 33 to 42. And those are the core of what path of knowledge is and what it does for you. It's called the Jnana Yoga. It's the introduction to why knowledge. What does knowledge do for you? This is the knowledge of the deepest truths. And it's a very short reading. You can read all of it probably in 5 minutes or listen to it within 5 minutes. It's very deep. So I want to go very deep and see what we can do on that. So that's on Friday. And then on Monday, we are continuing our Design Way series, and really looking forward to that. And Joe, this series is going so well. I really, Joe, Amon, Jason, I think this is just wonderful.
Thank you.
I miss it so much. It's like I had come in just to say hi, just to check up on you, make sure that you are feeling all right.
Yes, yes.
And I couldn't tear myself away.
This was a great session. It really was. I thought there was so much added, and I believe Dana, sharing his version as well. This was a really rich session. So thank you to everyone. I appreciate everybody being here this evening. It's an honor to be here each week, and I thank you for letting me host it. So.
All right, thank you, everybody. And Joe, you get to close the meetup.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Again,
Joe and Shrinkan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody, next week I'm going to Taiwan, so I'm going to log in from Taiwan. Okay. So.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, okay. Okay. So,
Jason, how long will you be in Taiwan?
I don't know, for a while, but I try to.
A while. Okay.
Because I need to be quarantined for 21 days, so it doesn't make sense to stay too short. Okay.
Of course.
Wow. Okay. So you'll be there for a while.
I think so. I just tested negative, so I'm okay to fly tomorrow. So
My test is tomorrow, so I hope I'm negative as well. So, but
right now in Los Angeles, like, I don't know, half of the people I know, they have a family got test positive. So
all right, no worries. I'm trying not to worry about that.
Yeah,
but anyway, but it's but thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
everyone
okay.
for joining this evening. It's been another wonderful week. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week. And again, everybody have a great evening.
all right, see you.
Take care.
Thank you, Shrikant. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.